Hey everybody, I just want to take a moment to thank all my subscribers and listeners that dedicate a little bit of time just to hear what I got to say. Thank you so much, but the struggle is real and it continues. Please spread awareness and do your part by making sure that you are subscribed and liking each of the episodes that you listen to. Share my episodes and spread awareness of my channel and what it is that I'm doing. These little things right here is what helps me grow and helps sponsorship come my way, as I am a struggling ex-con. I appreciate the support, the love, and thank you so much for tuning in. More to come. This episode has been brought to you by our friends over at CMB Law. If you find yourself in a tight spot and you need an attorney to trust, call Courtney over at CMB Law, 941-747-4440 or 941-725-9457. You can also visit her site at cmbjustice.com. cmbjustice.com. Again, that's Courtney at CMB Law. Tell them that Thomas FreeMe sent you from the Thomas FreeMe Podcast show. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Thomas FreeMe with the Thomas FreeMe TV and Podcast show. As promised, I brought back the wonderful Tanawa, Mr. Tanawa, and we are going to be breaking down what the Constitution of America is, what it means to us, what we are, how all of this formed as far as government, what government means, and all in hopes to really understand that when you hear my message and you hear me say that we are the boss, you know, that we are in charge, it starts to resonate and you can really start to understand what that means when I say that. So we have a lot to cover. Without further ado, Tanawa is going to break down exactly what government is, and today's episode is going to be mostly on the social compact theory. So good afternoon, sir, and if you will, just take off.
Okay. So as I start here, I want to say that I wrote a letter some time ago when all this started, and this letter has a lot of magic to it. It has a lot of meaning. You know, I got to know a lot of different people that were involved in this system, and when I did, once I got to see how unjust it actually was, I wrote this letter, and that was the day that I committed to actually doing this. So I want to go ahead and recite that letter real quick, and this will kind of set the tone for what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and what this means to me, because this is very important to me, what I'm doing now. 243 years ago, a great and powerful nation was established through the faith and fury of God in defiance to acts of oppression and abuse, which are contrary to the natural fruits of freedom. As a result, great men arose, awake to a new vision, a free one, where all citizens are bestowed certain inalienable rights from and by our Creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are not simply terms that are extended to the wealthy. They're not table scraps that are fought for as they fall from the table of the successful. No, they're freedoms. They're bestowed to all, regardless of age, race, wealth, intelligence, or history. It's the ability to visualize a dream of one's future and the power to then manifest such a dream. Success and failure is upon the individual and not the government. Limitations come simply from a person's inability to dream or the sins of oppression. Today, we call these men great, heroes, forefathers, and patriots, and they become symbols of our pride and our aspirations. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and so many more who are worthy of our mention and obliged to our eternal gratitude. But the story could so easily have been different. For before these great men were called patriots, they were called rebels, criminals, and tyrants. Their vision was dismissed, and their cause was laughed at. But they knew something that no one else did. They had a power that none of their enemies understood. It was the power of God and truth. Indeed, our nation is founded by rebels. And today, by delivering this notice in the presentation of irrefutable, reasonable, sound, just, and clear violations of the rights bestowed upon us by the United States Constitution and as designed by our Creator, new rebels have now emerged. But not to destroy a nation, instead to work together to bring about positive change and correct the flaws in our foundation so that no more will justice not prevail. No more will the innocent be punished. That we will return to the roots of our nation's freedoms and the source of our once great hope, that God Almighty is the only true and righteous judge, and that in his glory and in his power, guilt and innocence can be ascertained. The petitioners included in this written allegation are not only witnesses to these atrocities, but each and every single one of them have also been victim to them many times. But we are all very proud to claim that the blood of those rebels who fought to earn our freedoms 243 years ago is the very same blood that runs through all of our veins. So you can call us rebels. You can call us criminals. History, however, it will call us patriots. United we stand, but divided we fall. A great division has been placed across our nation, weakening our greatness and threatening our very existence. Am I not your brother? Has God not commanded your forgiveness and his vengeance? Is not your crimes perpetrated against me not equal to the allegations of the very same crimes perpetrated by me? How can one claim the rights and ability to judge me for an action to which the judge himself holds more guilt, yet refuses to cleanse himself first? My brother, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you'll see clearly remove the speck from my eye. If you say you want to judge, seek first judgment of your own house, and then you'll be qualified to come and help cleanse mine. With great power comes great responsibility. What is easy is not necessarily what is right, and what is right can sometimes seem wrong. But with God, all things are possible, and with the law, the correct path is now illuminated. This path will not be easy. There will be much work demanded, and many apologies will have to be offered, and that will take much courage. But where courage and its product transpires, strength will inversely come. That strength is the image of forgiveness, not vengeance. The strength to heal a divided nation because of the glorious gift of new life that God has given to us. To no longer be bound by the sins of our past, except the freedom of our futures, to truly be able to turn away from our old sinful lives, because sin no longer has its hold on us, is precisely the recipe that God has prepared in order for the courage and the strength needed to produce this amazing future for our country to now come about. Change does not come without reason. Reason does not come without wisdom, and wisdom does not come without mistakes. For a tree to grow, a seed must first die. The roots of tyranny and oppression can amass great evils. From those evils can come the condemnation of the innocent, the defamation of a good name, the confiscation of property, or the alienation and destruction of a family. We have been told the truth and the way to destroy evil from the ruler and creator of all. You overcome evil with good, and you never repay evil for its evil. So I implore you, with the greatest convictions that I can muster, grab hold of the weeds that are destroying our nation, take them by the roots of their evil, and let's extract them from our great nation. We who are free can only boast in the freedoms that are real and not an illusion. Where each only is free is the freedoms that are extended to all, and not simply some. Any time a freedom is demanded or stolen from one through justification or ignorance, that freedom and right is lost to all, and not simply the target of scorn and punishment. Any freedom which can be removed from one can be removed from all, and is no longer freedom, but simply an illusion of freedom. Evil shows no favoritism. When evil is given birth, it becomes a thief, and once a thief, we all must bear the consequences of its evil thievery. Vengeance solves nothing. Casting blame fails to grasp the greater message, and our mutual hope should be reconciliation, not just with each other, but with the faith in the source of our nation's foundation. We are a nation of laws, and those laws are essential to maintaining order and peace, but more importantly, we are a nation founded on faith. We must return to the faith of our design system, a system that sometimes a guilty person may appear to be set free, but more importantly, a system that, if utilized properly, innocent people will not be punished. Today, as of this moment, I can tell you, and I bear my own witness testimony as God is my witness as well, innocent people are being punished because the system is broken, and it is never acceptable, not in any country, state, city, or household, for an innocent person to be wrongfully or illegally imprisoned. Ignorance is not a defense. Simply because you do not understand the laws of gravity or believe in the laws of God does not mean that you're not bound by them. Lack of knowledge resulting in a violation does not eliminate you from the ramifications of such violations. The illegal and highly destructive acts perpetrated by the justice system, although I do not believe were intentional or malicious, does not negate their existence. Crimes done in secret and in the dark are still crimes, and justice still deserves to be rendered. However, as the petitioner, I bear great responsibility, and that God desires mercy and not sacrifice. Therefore, peaceful resolution and mercy for your ignorance I offer to you. In closing, as our brother James told us in his letter, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then choose to not do it. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect. But the difference between average and great, a sheep in a lion, is the ability to produce wisdom from one's mistakes. Everyone falls down, but only fools fail to stand back up. A repentant sinner is always forgiven when the repentance is sincere and a new course is charted. But woe to anyone when their pride and arrogance remains blind and cannot feel sorrow and compassion for the destruction that they themselves have caused. May God, in his righteous judgment, have mercy on those souls. This letter has been prepared in writing in my own hand, but the devastation exists through the lives and painful experiences of each and every single member of the attached petitioner list. Not one person, not one marriage, not one family, not one household, not one city, not one state can claim that the violations of the rights presented and proven within the argument presented has not affected them somewhere or in some way of their lives. When freedom is robbed from those who are free, truly I tell you that everyone pays for it, whether they realize it or not. Respectfully and peacefully, a servant of justice. So leading into the Constitution. The Constitution derives from what's called the social compact theory. So what happened was, man in his free state, when he's free in his natural state, he can do anything he wants. He can murder someone. He can rape someone. He can steal. He can do anything he wants because he's free. And he has that freedom to be able to do such. When we want our freedom, our forefathers wanted freedom, and we inherited it, we received our freedom, and we returned to our natural state. And as such, we decided we needed some sort of structure, some sort of relationship that existed among the people to allow for the existence of the individuals to continue to survive. Because you see, in a natural state of man, only the strong survive. The weak and the minority and the disenfranchised, they don't, because of course the strong will always push the weak out. So we wanted to protect that. We wanted to ensure that everybody had the right to be able to live and to be able to be free and to have liberty and to grow and live their life the way that they see fit, without governmental interference or without the majority interference. So the forefathers, they were studying how best to do this, and they decided that the social compact was of course the best solution. Now, the social compact theory goes like this. Each one of those freedoms that they have is in a natural state of man, such as the freedom to kill. If we give up our freedom to kill, and we all agree as a society, each one of us agree that we will give up our right to be able to kill someone. In exchange, we will receive the right to not be killed. So we don't have a right to not be killed in our natural state. We only have the right to kill. So by giving up one right or accepting the obligation to not kill someone, we have now received the right to not be killed. And that's where rights come from. That's why the duty comes before the right, because I have a duty to not kill someone. That's the establishment of the contract. Constitution is simply a contract. That's all it is. It is a legal relationship that changes your legal relationship with someone else. And so when it says in the Constitution that we have the right to life, liberty, and happiness, our duty and responsibility more than anything else is to ensure that this individual has the right to live and he can live his life. And we give him that ability, that he has the liberty to be able to make his own decisions for his family and for himself and for his best, his situation, his life. He knows better than I do how to live. And then we have a responsibility to ensure that we provide an environment where they can grow and be successful and be happy. So, of course, I'm not responsible for their happiness, neither are you, but we need to provide that environment. We need to allow these people to be able to be happy. And that's our duty and responsibility. That's what we accept through the Constitution of the United States. It's not some sort of complex, legal jargon. It simply is our decision to love our neighbor and care for them enough that we will give them the ability to grow and be happy and to be free and to live and so on. So when I say
barter
that,
system,
right? Yeah. Well, so we're going to give up all the bad things that we don't want, all the bad things that we have the freedom to do in our natural state, and in exchange we will receive rights. So that's why Thomas Jefferson and Jacques Rousseau, that's why they say that we gain civil rights through the acceptance of obligation to protect the rights of others. You see, we ourselves receive those rights when we choose to obligate ourselves to protect them for other people. Mm-hmm. So when we're no longer protecting them for other people, guess what? We lose those rights, because our rights only exist when we choose to accept the obligation to protect the rights of others. So you have essentially two different groups of people. You always have a majority and you always have a minority, and there's that exists all the time. I mean, there isn't an established class that's from a legal perspective, but there will always be a class of people. There will always be someone who will be looking upon another group of people and saying, that and acting in an oppressive manner. So the purpose of the Constitution was to protect those individuals, was to protect the minority from the majority. And so today, for instance, we see something completely different. We see the Constitution itself and the law and the court system, it's actually being used as a weapon against the minority, which is not at all what it was intended to do. These judges, the purpose of the judges and the purpose of the justices, they're known as the guarantors of liberty. Mm-hmm. And so, or the defenders of liberty. That's what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be defending the minority. They're supposed to be getting in there and protecting them from the majority and acting in a fair manner. I mean, that was the whole purpose of the judiciary, and they've just lost their way. And we need to work on getting them back. So the social compact theory, it goes kind of like this. Okay, one day, Caveman Bob just sitting up against his lean-to. He looks out across this canyon and he sees Caveman Bill over on the other side. And he thinks to himself, you know what? Caveman Bill's kind of big. I don't want him to kill me. So he decides he's going to go over there and have a discussion with Caveman Bill. He goes over there and he sits down with Caveman Bill. He says, listen, I don't want to be killed. I would like to live. Can we make an agreement that you will not kill me? And he says, well, that sounds like a good idea, because I was a little bit concerned about you killing me. So yes, we will establish an agreement that says that we will not kill each other. And in exchange, they will both receive the right to not be killed. So they make that agreement, and it becomes the origins of the social compact. Now, one day, another caveman Tom, up the road, he hears about this agreement. And he says, boy, I want to get in on that too. So he comes on down, and on his way, he picks up another 5 cavemen. And they get there, and they have the conversation with Bob and Bill, and they agree that they will all join this, and they will all give up their right to kill each other. And in exchange, they will receive the right to not be killed. So now they have an established right to not die. But as they were getting finished, one of the cavemen, he says, you know what? I'm sick of getting my stuff stolen all the time. Can we make an agreement that we will not steal from each other, and in exchange we will receive the right to not have something stolen? And they all thought about it and said, that's a great idea. I'm sick of getting my stuff stolen as well. So they all make the agreement now to give up another right, natural right that they have, the natural right to steal. And in exchange, they will receive the guaranteed right to not have things stolen from them. So the right to not have something stolen doesn't exist when you're in your natural state. Only the right to steal. So only the negative parts exist in the natural state of man. So in exchange, we are actually creating something that didn't exist before. We're creating something that is desirable by accepting the obligation, each one of us, to not do or perform the negative or derogatory act. So this goes on, it goes on as it grows and grows and grows, and more people come along and with more ideas on things to accept. Each one of these acceptance, each one of these obligations is actually a law. Okay, so if you look at law is not complicated either. Really, all that law is it is the establishment of an obligation. That's all that law is. Okay. So, for instance, I have an obligation to not speed my car, or I have an obligation to not kill someone. I have an obligation to not violate someone. These are obligations that exist. That's all that the law is simply obligations. And as we accept these obligations, then we, in exchange, receive the right that's protected by that obligation. So, therefore, when someone chooses to breach their duty to or their obligation to not steal from me, and someone steals from me, now I've had my right violated, and I now need to be made whole. So the right actually comes always after the violation of the duty or the obligation. That's why rights always derive from another's duty to act. There is no right that's violated until someone else breaches their duty to act. So when you accept these obligations, such as us individually as the people, we accept those obligations by electing our officials, our political officials, to go to Congress, and they make these laws. They make these laws on our behalf. Now, the laws have gotten a little bit out of hand. We have way too many of them at this point in time. It's very difficult to be able to abide by the laws when they're so complex that you have to have a doctorate degree in order to understand them. I mean, how can you say to Bob or Tom that he violated the law when he can't even read the law? Because it's so complex and because it's written in such a way that nobody can understand it. You know, all these double negatives. That's not the way that law is supposed to be. And when you read the Constitution of the United States, you see it is very direct and poignant. It's simple. You have the freedom of speech. Simple, right? You don't need it more complex than that, right? You have the freedom of religion. It doesn't need to be more complex than that. You don't need to define the hours in which you have the freedom of speech. You don't need to define the days in which, no, you have that right. It exists, period. And so the law is supposed to be quite simple because we want it to be simple so that people can understand it. Because there are 3 things that are necessary in order for a crime to occur. You have to have the corpus delicti, which is the body of the crime, what actually occurred. You have to have that actus reus, which is the actual act that occurs. And then you have to have the third thing, which is mens rea. You have to have a guilty mind. You have to know that you broke the law. Absent any one of those 3 things, you don't have a crime at all. And a lot of the crimes that are allegedly happening that I'm seeing across the country and talking with people, there's an absence of mens rea. They don't even realize that they broke the law because they don't even understand the law. So then they're coming into this courtroom, being arraigned for something they don't even understand and pleading guilty to it because they can't read the law. They have to have, this individual come in to represent them to interpret this law, and even they can't interpret it accurately. So, the thing is that each one of these obligations that we accept is a law, and that's where the law arises. So the laws arise from our acceptance of these obligations. Now, I talked last time about sovereignty, right? And sovereignty derives from the theory that the king can do no wrong because the king is sovereign and the laws come from him. And as a result, you can't sue him or charge him with a crime unless he gives his consent. Now, we give our consent by simply electing the individuals into office, and by doing so, we give our consent to be subject to the laws that are in question. that means that we are in fact the ones that are sovereign. Nobody can take our rights away from us. We're free. They were given to us. They're our entitlement. The only way that they can be taken is through our consent. We have to agree to do it. And that's why if you were to go out and read the FBI's website right now, or the Department of Justice, and I could show the exact page, but it says specifically that no one in America can be sent to prison without their consent. You have to give your permission to go to prison, because you cannot have your freedom taken away. Government cannot take it from you without your permission. So we give our consent. Now, consent comes in many forms, and it's primarily just simply our silence more than anything. As Plato said, silence is your consent. So when we give our consent, we're simply saying to the court, yes, you have jurisdiction over me. Yes, you can do these things to me, and yes, I'm not arguing. But if we refuse our consent, then the court no longer has jurisdiction, because they don't have jurisdiction over the sovereign without his consent. Now, there's certain, yeah.
Where does that consent come in at? Like, say you just said, how it says in the DOJ, nobody can be sent to prison without their consent. But that doesn't mean that anybody can just stand up and say, well, I'm not giving my consent to go to prison. So where is your everyday citizen giving that consent?
They're giving it through their silence. They're giving it through simply not speaking up and saying, I do not consent to this law. I do not subject myself to this law. Now, there's going to be argument, right? Because everyone's going to agree that to murder someone is going to be giving your consent. That's something that we're not going to allow. But there are other arbitrary laws that exist. And so one of the big theories behind the development of our nation and development of our laws was that when government becomes oppressive, when they do things that are contrary to laws that are written and in place, when they do that, then we as a nation have the right and duty to take back our consent. We have the right and duty to restore our original liberty. That's how we get the government to return to a state of subjection to the people. You see, when we start to say to government that you are governing us in a manner contrary to laws that we established, for instance, in my case, when they failed to have an indictment by a grand jury prior to holding me over for an infamous crime, guess what? That is in violation of Clause 1 of Amendment 5. And as a result, I now have the right to take back my power. I give my power to you, but now you no longer have my power, government. And until you subject yourself back to my laws and to our laws, then guess what? I'm not gonna obey you. And it's not that I'm going to go out of my way and start breaking law. No, I'm simply going to say that you no longer have the authority to be able to rule over me, because you have to subject yourself to the laws that we create. We create the laws. We are the originator of them. And as a result, the agreement that's in place, now we're going to get to this now, but the agreement that's in place is that the government is to enforce the laws as the people dictate. And that's one of the unique elements of America was that we, the people, we decide our future. It's up to us, because we are the ones that determine how we are to be governed, right? That's why we, the people, give the government the power to govern through the consent of the governed. We give our consent to be subjected to the laws, but it's the laws that we create, not that it creates. That's why the judicial branch has no legal authority to legislate. That's why the executive branch has no legal authority to legislate. They don't have the authority to create the laws, because the laws must be made by the people. That's why Congress of the United States is responsible for all legislative powers, because the people are responsible for creating our own laws. And that's a big problem that we have today. I mean, this isn't the time that I'm going to go over it, but when you have judges that are responsible for determining the laws and the future of the laws, and then producing laws that are contrary to the Constitution, and then when we raise, as a United States citizen, when I raise an argument that pertains to a constitutional deprivation, and they say you don't get that because this case from 1884 says that you don't, well, now we have an issue. Because now we have the judges or the judicial branch that is now altering or amending the Constitution of the United States based upon legal precedent. And that can't be so. Because the lowest form of law, it's not even called law, it's called rulings. Judges rule, let people create laws. So the people create laws, judges create rulings. Rulings do not have the authority to change the laws. So we decide what they are. And so today what we have is we have a system that is no longer being constructed based upon the will of the people, but instead upon what's called judicial realism or legal realism, which is the theory that judges make the laws based upon their own political, social, or public policy. And so that's where we get into precedents and stare decisis, which we'll cover in this week. But so what happened once again is we created these laws, these obligations, we accepted these obligations. Now, this agreement, this contract that we put into place, it got so big that eventually what happened was that when something wrong happened, when something occurred and someone's right was violated, there was nobody there or nothing there to be able to determine, who was liable, what the damages were, and so on. So there arises the establishment of government. So government then arises, and government's sole purpose, the only purpose of government, is to ensure the protection of the rights that are not given up within the social compact, right? So that was the sole purpose of government, was to protect those rights that were not given up in the compact. Government was to ensure the protection of life, liberty, and property, the ability to be happy, pursue happiness. Those are the three things that government, no matter what, was supposed to do. That's the sole purpose of government. Government's not there to create the money. Well, I mean, it's written in the Constitution, but government's not there to control healthcare. Government's not there to interfere with private marketplace. That's not the role of government. The role of government from the very beginning was simply to preserve and protect the rights that were not given up within the contract, within the social compact. So we have different rights that exist within the Constitution that are written and enumerated within it. But then we have these other figments, right? These unknowns. And the forefathers knew that there were going to be things that would come up that were unknown. And when people talk about the Constitution, they say, oh, that's an old, outdated document. We need to update it because there's things that change. That's not how it works. That's not at all how it works. The Constitution itself says that we reserve rights not enumerated within the Constitution. So we have the ability to say, you know what, this is a right that we want to preserve. Now, there's a difference between what's called a civil liberty and a civil right. Okay, and this is really important. A civil liberty is what is actually written in the Constitution of the United States. Those are to be preserved. They can never be taken away without a modification or an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Okay, so when it says you have the freedom of speech, you cannot take away the freedom of speech from another individual without first ratifying an amendment to the Constitution and eliminating that right. Okay, you can't do it. So there would be that, right? Government does not have the authority to alter, amend, or destroy the Constitution of the United States. Now, one of the reasons why the government can't do that is because if government were able to take away a right, that's not a right, that's a privilege, because then the government is giving us a privilege. They're giving us this ability. You have the privilege to speak. Well, okay, privilege isn't a right. Privilege can be taken away by the government, but the government is not the originator of our rights. We are. We created those rights for us to be preserved and protected individually. So when government comes in and they make a ruling that says you don't get this, well, guess what? Government has no legal authority to do that, and that kind of goes to what's going on today with COVID and this illness. Is that government feels as though they can take away our rights, that our rights are subject to the conditions of the country. That if there's an illness that comes along, government has the legal authority to be able to shut it down. The president could shut down the whole country. That's not true. Our forefathers would have never written that into the Constitution. They would have never allowed that, because if that's the case, then guess what? That would say that government can take away our rights at any point in time. They can create an illness and say that this illness is going to kill everybody. And as a result, they're going to shut down the country so that we destroy small businesses. We destroy the backbone of our country. So we move and shift power from the people into government. That was never the intent. That would have never, ever been written. See, our forefathers, when they fought for our freedom, they weren't concerned about the individual. They were concerned about government. So do you think that they wrote these provisions to go against the people, to take away their rights? Absolutely not. That was not at all what the intent was.
Well, let's get into let's touch on that just for a minute of what that environment looked like at that time that these forefathers are writing this out, and what their thought process was, of course, in our opinions, but as just to that environment.
Yeah. So when you read the Declaration of Independence, they actually call out a number of very specific allegations against the king. And they were things such as They have turned their ears away from justice. Justice is not heard anymore. They said that our numerous petitions have fallen on deaf ears and have had no action occur. So they were petitioning the government for redress of grievances. They were asking the government, saying, this is an injustice that's occurring to us. We want a resolution to this. And they were ignoring them over and over and over again. Justice was ignored. They said that the majority of the cases.
And this was the king, the king of who? Britain?
The king of England. Yeah,
the king of England. Yep.
So we were under England, but
under British rule. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were originally, most of the people that were here under a penal system. I mean, a lot of the original people that were sent to America were prisoners. We were sent here as a punishment, a penal colony. And so, we were naturally rebellious anyway. I mean, I think that's one of our good strengths is that we're not going to put up with a whole bunch of BS, because our heritage is that we're not that type of people. And but so when you look at the Declaration of Independence and you read it, you find a number of the things that the king was doing against our colony, against our people. And what's very interesting is that most of those things are happening right now, today, right? We have taxation without representation, absolutely. And when you look at the justice system and the criminal system, you owe a debt to society. So once again, it's a debt. And when the government creates a debt, that is in fact tax. Even if it is on an individual, it's tax. And so when we have taxation without representation, who is establishing this debt against society without the grand jury? The grand jury exists because the grand jury is the people, representative of the people. The people determine that a debt exists against the people. And so when the executive branch, being the prosecutor, or the judge, being the judicial branch, when they determine that this debt exists, that's not being created by society. The people aren't creating that. Actually, different branches are. And the only branch that has legal authority to be able to create taxes is, in fact, the legislative branch, the people. So absent the grand jury, these debts, these supposed arraignment of charges, they're not legal. They're not valid because they're being created by a branch of government that's not legally constituted to be able to create a debt against the people. Mm-hmm. So, there's all these fraud elements. But so when you look at some of the things, another one, a huge one within the Declaration of Independence was that in most cases, the accused is denied his right to trial by jury. In most cases, they're denied the right to trial by jury. This same thing was happening back then. They were being threatened and intimidated, forced into pleading guilty. That's why when you look at the Bill of Rights, you go through it, it absolutely 100% is applicable today, because the rights that we're being deprived in the courtroom every single day are the same things that's happened before. And when you think about it, there's this old saying that how incredibly alike are all of the tyrants, but how gloriously different are each of the saints. The tyrants are always the same. They act the same way. If you want to predict the future, all you have to do is study the past, because the tyrants will always do the same things over and over again. I mentioned the last time that one of the first things I did when I went into prison was I copied the whole Black's Dictionary and Criminal Procedure Manual. I did that because I knew from history that the first thing that they do when you rise up is they take away your books. I already knew that. You can predict what they're going to do, and I was accurate. The moment I did it, the next day they were in there taking those books away. So, we as society, we can look at some of the things that's going on, and we can say, okay, this is how they're going to act. This is what they're going to do because this is how they did it in the past. And I'd love to illustrate on that, but I don't want to, because that's a little bit of strategy that I have that still exists within the case I'm bringing forward. But we can do that. We can look at where we are today, and we can actually predict where we'll be tomorrow based upon the historical acts of the tyrant. Mm-hmm. And so within the Declaration of Independence, we had all of these allegations that were raised against the king. And we said, you know what, enough's enough. We have the right to be able to be free. And we're now declaring that right. We're now declaring that we are equal to you, that a king is created just like I am. We both put up pants the same way. God created us both as being equal because God created us both. And God didn't create anyone to be abused or trodden upon by his fellow man. And so that was the establishment of our Declaration of Independence. So we were dealing with an extremely oppressive and venal government that was locking us up for no reason, that were taxing us for no reason, that were taking our children and our property. And we wanted to stop that. And so that's what we did. I mean, we joined together. We banded together as a group of men. against the most powerful military force in history, a military force that has never lost in battle, and we went up against them with pitchforks and shovels. I mean, no one in the world would have thought that we could have won. But the reason why we won is because, one, we were fighting for each other. When you fight for freedom, you don't fight for yourself. You fight for the brothers around you. You fight for your children. You fight for your wife. You're not a hired militiaman. You're not a hired officer. You're not fighting for the money. You're fighting literally for yourself and your posterity. And that's what happened. So our forefathers, they had a vision, and that vision was that we're going to be free. And that's what we got to fight for every single day. That's what we got to remember, is that these things that we're entitled to, that we're given through our inheritance, we have no idea how valuable they are. I mean, these are the greatest treasure given to man, and they were given to us, and we're allowing them to just be taken for what? I mean, so
that's again, this is why I have you here to educate us on that, because what's important and what you're describing, again, this is the late 1700s or early 1800s, or and the government has been doing and trying to take away our rights from the beginning. This has been their agenda it's generational, and it's like you say, it's now they're continuing to do it now, and this is why this is important. So please continue.
Yeah, like Thomas Jefferson said, I mean, power breeds tyrants. I'm of the opinion, because I look in the good in everyone. I'm of the opinion that there's no America and no American that wants to see the destruction of America. I think that the majority of the people that are violating our rights, I don't think that they really realize what they're doing. I think that they think that they're doing the right thing. But as Nietzsche, the famous philosopher, once said, he said, those who fight monsters should see to it that in the process they don't become a monster. Right? We created a system that was intended to fight monsters, and in the process, it has slowly become the monster itself. And I think that personally, I do truly believe that once these people realize what is happening, what they're doing, and how destructive it is to our nation, and how harmful it is to our people, I do believe that it'll change fairly quickly. A lot of people say that this will never happen. Government's too big and stuff. Government is nothing without the people. And if the people realize that every right that they take away from us, they're taking away from them and taking away from their children, they're going to say, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. I may be the president today, but tomorrow my child is not going to have the freedom. I don't think I want to do that. Right. And so I truly, truly believe that the reality is that once we realize as a nation, as a people, that the things that we're doing are destroying our own country, and we're not seeking to preserve a state, we're seeking to preserve the nation. Because what is it that we love? Do we love Washington? Do we love California? No, we love America. And if we love America, and that's what we believe in, then that's what we need to be preserving. And America it's just not the United States of Washington or the United States of California. It's the United States of America. It is 50 regional governments, each with their own cultural values and their own individual values, each with their own voice to be heard within the nation, because there's good ideas coming out of North Carolina just as much as there is coming out of California. And each and every single regional government needs to be heard. And so that's why our government's motto is e pluribus unum, out of many, one, because we're one nation. We're not 50. So when we start talking about these states' rights, we start talking about this individual ability to rule and govern regionally as we like, that's destroying our country. We can't do that. So once again, I mean, we had a venal oppressive government that existed. And so we said, we're not going to do that anymore. And we declared our freedom. And it would be the same way that we would do today. That listen, you are not governing us in the way that we see fit. And so as a result, I am no longer subject to obedience to the government. So if you look at it again from a contract perspective, because that's all the Constitution is a contract. So when the people create the laws, the Constitution, we accept the obligation to give up certain rights. In exchange, we will receive the guarantee of other rights to be preserved. So then what happens when government comes in, we give government the laws and then we say, here, administer these laws as written. And so as long as government is administering those laws and governing us the way that we have designed it to be governed, then we are subject to obedience to the government. We must obey, right? But the moment that the government breaches its duty to govern us the way that we see fit, then we then have the right to breach our obedience to the government. So I'm not saying go out and break the law. I'm not saying go out and kill people. I'm saying that we have the right to be able to live our life now the way that we see fit. And if government comes in and says, no, we don't, we're declaring our freedom. We're declaring our independence once again. And we're saying to the government that you must govern us the way that we design. Otherwise, you're not legitimate. There is no validity of the government. And so we really just need the government to understand that it's subject to us. We make the determination. And when we say that, every single person that's within government, they're all subject to the same laws. And if they continue to oppress us and take those things away, they themselves are losing them. That's why any freedom that is removed from one can be removed from all, and is no longer freedom, but an illusion of freedom. If I can take away the gun rights from this individual for whatever reason that might be, maybe we justify it or not, if I can take away that rights from this individual, guess what? I can take it away from everyone. So the argument that you can take away the gun rights of this person or whatever, that establishes the ability to take it away from all. And it's no longer freedom. It simply is an illusion of freedom, because a freedom or a right is guaranteed to all. It can't be taken away from any, because if you're able to take it away, then that means that it's a privilege now. Government then gives us that. And that's not where we get our freedoms. We get it from us. Therefore, we need to stand up for our freedoms. Do you have a question? Oh, again, there's a contract that exists. That contract establishes duties and rights, because that's all the contract does. It establishes duties and it establishes rights. So the Constitution of the United States, the purpose of it, right? The beginning purpose is it is to establish rights and to limit powers, right? So people have rights, government has powers. So when we talk about states' rights, there's some confusion there, because states don't have rights, states have powers, right? And there's a bunch of documentation that I've already presented as far as where that derives from, where the whole concept of states' rights come from. But people have rights, government has powers. Powers are intentionally limited by the Constitution in order to preserve the right. So, when you deal with the Constitution, it's basically it's a web of obligations and duties for the government. So it says to the government that you must before you can hold someone over for trial, you must have an indictment by a grand jury. That's a duty. It's an obligation the government accepts by accepting the contract that the people have presented it. Another one would be the trial of all crimes, with the exception of impeachment, shall be by jury. Right. So that establishes the fact that the government must provide a jury trial in order to adjudicate the crimes with everyone except for impeachment. So these are obligations and duties for the government. They're not necessarily defining rights. Our rights exist when the government breaches its duty to act. And it does it through the actions of the agent. So when you look at the law itself, the law is sovereign. The law is what rules over us, right? So the law is correct. We must follow the law. But the law is actually executed through the actions of the agents. So when the agent breaches its duty, it's not the law itself that's violated. We talked about that last week. We said, is the Constitution a racist document? No, actually it's not. The law itself is holy and pure. It functions properly, because in the eyes of the law, there is no color. In the eyes of the law, there is no sex. In the eyes of the law, there is no man, woman. The law is applicable to all, because it's not written to say that this only applies to women or this only applies to men, right? It's not written that way. So there was a question the other week about the ERA, and that's the establishment of the Equal Rights Act, and whether or not it was actually
ratified.
Well, the issue is not that whether that was ratified or not. The issue is that the Bible itself says that God created them, male and female. So a man is male and female. We're both. So to say that a woman doesn't have the same rights as a man is fundamentally incorrect, right? It is. And so we have equal rights. You cannot have a law that isolates or only affects one group of people, because in an egalitarianism type government, that is not a valid law. That's why we have equal protection of laws. That's why we have the requirement for all laws to be equally applicable to all, both the 14th Amendment as well as also in Article 4. So Article 4 of the main Constitution says the citizens in each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities as the citizens in the several states, which means that when I'm in one state, I can't be deprived a right that's secured by and guaranteed by by the Constitution, and it's enjoyed by citizens in other states, because that would be an equal protection issue. I'm entitled to the same rights and privileges as any other United States citizen, no matter where I choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. And so this argument on the ERA is there's no validity. We're all one. We're all the same people. And the moment that I choose to breach my obligation and take away your right to be protected by the Constitution, I just lost my own right to be protected by the Constitution. And that's what we're doing to our country right now. The moment that we start pointing our fingers and we say that person needs to pay, well, guess what? You yourself are going to pay. That's why the Constitution is built on the golden rule. Do unto others as you yourself would want to be done to you. Are we going to treat our neighbors as though the same way that we want to be treated ourselves? That's the real question. So
at this time back then, we're everything is in chaos, and we're fighting for, as you said, just our freedoms and our liberties, and we're understanding that we have to get Britain out of our house, right? And we have conflict going on, we have war going on. This is is this the Revolutionary War?
I think we're at Civil War. We're a little bit further along from Revolutionary War. This isn't Britain that's in office right now. This is the southern states. We thought that the North won the Civil War, but the reality is that all the people we were fighting, the terrorism from the South, we simply allowed them to come in and take political office all throughout the country. That's why we have slavery all throughout the nation. That's why we have we have Juris Doctors. We have people with degrees in creating a slave in literally every political office across the country. That's the problem, is that the North didn't win in the end. We just simply allowed the enemy to come and take over every single political office across the country. Slavery is not okay. It's not acceptable.
But but the Constitution was already constructed by the time the Civil War happened, no?
Yeah, it was. But the enemy that we're facing is more along the lines of the southern states. It's the influx of this democratic theory of government, and I hate to bring it up because there's a difference between a Republican form of government, which is what we're supposed to have, and that's defined within the Constitution of the United States. It says that we are to guarantee to the states a Republican form of government and a democratic form of government. There's a big difference between the two. We were never supposed to be a democratic form of government. This is not about political parties. This is about fundamental objectives of that particular form of government. And so if you look at the historical elements of it, the southern states that were allowing slavery, those were the democratic states. They were all democratic from the South. And so in a democratic form of government, what happens is that each individual citizen participates in the process. So each individual participates in the whole process. And so what happens then is over time you get rule of the majority or mob rule, because over time you get high concentrations of people within certain areas, within certain regional locations. And so the forefathers, they recognize the fact that we're a very vast territory of a nation with lots and lots of different individual regions. And we wanted to be able to have each one of these regions, these local governments, be able to have their own input and not be forced into doing what these individual population locations did. So their concern was a lot of what's happening today. Thomas Jefferson said that federalism is not about a single state or a small faction of states imposing their will upon the nation, but actually the states acting as an aggregate, as an essential buffer between the people and the central government. The purpose of the states were to protect the people from the central government, protect them. And so it wasn't to impose their will upon the nation. When you have a single state like California or Washington with a high concentration of high population of people that's imposing then their will upon the nation, then you have disharmony, right? Because the laws are supposed to advance based upon the will of the people. Suffrage, the voting, is the act of the constituency. All of us, we all vote together and we decide to advance our laws based upon that, not based upon the will of one single location or one single region. So that's why we went with the Republican form of government, was because a Republican form of government puts emphasis on the regional governments and then allows for the equal input at the central government. So each one of them is represented equally. So we get input from North Carolina and we get input from California, and there's no greater value among the two. And so we have this harmony that advances so we can recognize the fact that there's different cultural values all throughout the country. and we're not going to eliminate them. We're not going to just silence them and say we don't care about what you do or how you act, and we're just going to impose our will upon you. So we're never supposed to be a democratic form of government. Every single democratic government in history, and you can go to all the philosophers from Josephus to Socrates to Plato, every single one of them said that tyranny derives from a democratic form of government. There are 4 phases of government in a democratic government, and the 4th phase is a tyrant. At some point in time, we switched from a republic, and we're now a democratic form of government. And we've got these small independent factions of highly concentrated people that's imposing their will upon the rest of the nation, and that is causing this disharmony. It can't be that way. We have to have representation from each one of these governments and ability to have our own input and have that input be recognized and valued and not imposed upon.
Okay, so again, from my, I guess I'm confused a little bit, because from my understanding, from my education, which I know is government education when it comes to this here, just school books from school or whatever I'm trying to remember, but I was always under the impression that it was the Revolutionary War, and that we were trying to push the Brits out and form our own government. And then this is when, as we will get into next week, the Bill of Rights and things of that was formed.
Yeah. The problem is that we already have our freedom. It's already been established. And so, like I said, if you want to predict the future, all you have to do is study the past. And so we can actually see in the grand scheme of things, when you are able to point out individual things that are occurring, we can point out the point with which we're actually at. And so let me give you a quick example. Okay. The Dred Scott case, which is actually what caused the Civil War. So in the Dred Scott case, what happened was this individual that was a slave, he went from a slave state, and his master brought him into a free state, right? And while he's in the free state, he recognized that, hey, I'm free because I'm within a state that has freedom. So what he did was he petitioned the United States Supreme Court saying, I would like to petition for my freedom. I'm now suing for my freedom. The question that was asked to the court was, does a slave have the right to be able to sue for his freedom in federal court? Now, the problem is that the Supreme Court, anytime you bring a civil rights case to them, it's not about what's right or wrong. It's not about what's just or unjust. It's about what is the most cost effective. That's all that they care about, right? That's all that they have ever cared about all through history. So the court didn't want to make that decision because the court knew that, yes, that individual is in a free state. If we rule on this, we are going to have to set him free. And that's going to open up the floodgates for all these other slaves to come in and start declaring their freedom. And they didn't want to make that decision. They didn't want to make the ruling. So anytime you sue in federal court, there's standing, right? You have to have standing. And so there's basically 2 requirements for standing. One is you have to be directly impacted by the law that's in question, right? Obviously, the slave was impacted by the slave law. There's no denying that. The second is you have to be a person, right? In some laws, it says a citizen, but in this case, it said a person. So the court had, in order to not rule on that case, the court had to decide one of those 2 things. It had to make either A, he's not a person, or B, he's not affected by the law. They obviously can't do it by not being affected by the law. So they made the decision, we got to make this individual, this slave, this black person, not a person. So what they did was first they said that citizen and person are synonymous with one another. They mean the same thing. So what the ruling was they were saying, we aren't going to make this ruling because this individual doesn't have standing. And what they said was that blacks are not and were not intended to be included under the word citizen in the Constitution. So what they said is that blacks weren't intended to be people when it comes to the Constitution. And in doing so, when making that ruling, what they did was they said, we're not going to rule on this. And now blacks aren't people, right? And that was a terrible decision. And that's what led to the start of the Civil War. Now, Dred Scott was supposed to have been technically overruled by the 14th Amendment. Representative Bingham, when he introduced it to Congress, and Senator Howard, when he represented it to the Senate, this bill, the 14th Amendment, both of them specifically stated that this was the intent. It was to technically overrule Dred Scott and declare that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are, in fact, citizens of the United States. And take away this whole concept or theory that the color of your skin dictates whether or not you're a person. It's just not valid. I put out a posting today that kind of explains what happened. But after that decision was made, there's a reason why Dred Scott was brought back in. And what happened was that Chief Justice Waite, he wanted to advance the slave industry. He was a Southern state sympathizer. He wanted to, yes.
Well, I'm severely confused here because I think we got off topic. This was is this still in line with the construct of the Constitution and leading into the bill? Because we're already talking about federal court rulings and the 14th Amendment and all that, but
we're way past that at this point. Yeah, and we should go back, but if I could just finish up the point here, and I won't go into the Dred Scott case anymore, other than the fact that case, even though it was technically overruled by the 14th Amendment, it was brought back in. And so what we see today is a lot of these rulings are deriving from that particular ruling. So when we look at the laws today, they derive from a specific root, a case. So when the Supreme Court of the United States makes a decision, a ruling, it then flows out to all of the regional courts for administration and acceptance. So these rulings that are then produced from that point forward, until that case is overruled and removed from jurisprudence, from American law, each one of these rulings are predicated upon that erroneous ruling. And so what happened to me was when I filed my civil action complaint in United States District Court, they said, we don't have jurisdiction. And I said, well, no, technically you do, because under Title 28, 1343, it says that the district court has original jurisdiction of any civil action brought by any person. So civil action brought by a person. I did bring a civil action and I was a person. So I presented that to the district court. But what the district court said was, ordinarily we would have jurisdiction, but that provision or that statute can't be used by state prisoners, can't be used by slaves, which means that slaves are not people. We have the exact same ruling in the exact same form that was made by the judiciary, that was made by Dred Scott. They said, well, yeah, we would have jurisdiction if you were a person, but state prisoners can't use that particular provision. State prisoners are not people. And it's the exact same context of the ruling. And so that's why I say that we're at a different stage within the development of the nation. We want to look at where we were at, in the time frame when they make that ruling. We are literally on the verge of civil war. I mean, the same things that were manifesting then are literally manifesting today. And you also have the states, the southern states themselves, that say, you know what, we're not going to follow the federal laws because we want to keep our slave institution. And when I filed my civil action complaint to the state of Washington, the response from the Attorney General of Washington, Bob Ferguson, was the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply to the state of Washington. Or in other words, we're not going to give up our institution of slavery. So we have the exact same things happening. And that's why I say that we're a little bit further along than the Revolutionary War, because if you look at time frame, the things that are occurring within our country right now, we're literally, there. I mean, we could go into civil war at any moment. And I don't want to see that happen. We don't need to take that path. I don't believe that going to arms and guns are the way to do it. I think dialogue and speaking and that's where power comes from. Convincing others that this is the way that we should do it. And so I'm trying to create that dialogue.
Well, the dialogue's been there. It's just the dialogue has always been there. It's just what kind of dialogue is it? And it's a very uneducated dialogue. And it's this dialogue is a lot of it is built upon lies and fallacy and things of that nature. This is right. Some of the part why you and I connected to try to undo some of the damage that has been done, if possible, if people are even willing, to still listen. And this is why I felt like to really truly understand how the Constitution was conceived, the thought process of our forefathers at that time, wanting to get out of European control, wanting to get out of British control and establish our own Constitution, our own rights. And then, the frame of mind behind that, and then leading into how did this Constitution that was supposed to be built for the people turn its back on a certain person, right? Which is what you're getting into now, and I think there's a lot of people that really want to really understand how that happened. It's not so much as speeding through it and because we know that it's what happened, but people really want to understand where that shift happened. So you have a race of people that we've left behind for 400 years, and we're expecting these people just to get over it. and it's understanding that gap. I just watched a TikTok yesterday with some ignorant white dude on there talking about, his white privilege and where's it at. And I work, 80 hours a week and I have these muddy boots and all of these things. What he's not understanding is, okay, that's you. That's one generation. But what you're not understanding is your grandfather's grandfather's grandfather, the privilege that he had to go to a higher school of learning when there was people on the other side of the tracks that had no school of learning. And there was generations of that was continuing. It was that your great, 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 great granddaddy had a job and was able to work. And the man that was across the street was being sent to prison because at that time you had peonage, right? As we get into about collection of debt, that if you didn't have a job, if you were unemployed, you went to prison. Well, a black man back then couldn't find a job. So guess where he was going? So this is what we're trying to understand and get people to understand is it's not just get over it, but the construct of how this Constitution has been used against us. And now we have people that are saying, fuck the Constitution. It's racist. It don't have anything to do with me. This is the uneducation that you and I hopefully can undo.
So the key to the whole Constitution and the thing that's been forgotten is duties and rights. That is the absolute key to understanding where we're at today and where everything's gone wrong. The government and each one of the individuals, when they accept the oath, when they enter into the oath or affirmation that they will support the Constitution of the United States, they accept the obligation to do what is actually in the Constitution. And it actually says that in Article 6. It says the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any states contrary notwithstanding. So we have this case from 1833. 1833 is when everything went awry. All right. It's a case called Barron versus Baltimore. And the case Barron versus Baltimore, the Supreme Court of the United States came out and said the Bill of Rights, which was ratified by the people on December 15th, 1791, in all intents and purposes, that does not apply as a restriction against the states. Okay, that was a decision that they made. They said that is only a restriction against the Congress of the United States. So obviously that's an erroneous, unconstitutional decision. It was made for very specific reasons that we won't go into right now. But when they say that the Bill of Rights does not apply to the states, that means that you don't actually have the freedom of speech within the state unless the state's constitution expressly states that you do. They were saying that you are only entitled within the states, whatever the states give you. And your federal rights only exist within a federal domain. But what is the federal domain? I mean, I'm still within the jurisdiction of the United States. I'm still a United States citizen, no matter where I choose to reside. Am I not? Therefore, I should be entitled to those rights. But the court made that decision. Now, there's other reasons why it's an erroneous decision, such as the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution. So when you look at amendments to the Constitution, right, that comes from the special amending procedures in Article 5. And it says that once ratified, amended or proposed amendments shall become part of the Constitution in all intents and purposes. So yes, anytime you amend the Constitution, you provide it becomes part of the Constitution, and therefore it's in the Constitution, and the judges must do it within every state. So when the judicial branch makes a ruling such as that, it says, you know what, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. And I'll tell you, today, as of right now, that is still standing precedent. That's where all of our rights are being taken away. When you say, I thought I had the right to freedom of speech, or I thought I had the right to a jury trial, they're pointing to that case, Barron versus Baltimore from 1833, and saying, you don't have this because of that case. It is still existing, standing precedent today. And that's not acceptable. So, yeah.
Well, we got to wrap it up. But on that note, going into next week, I would like to read off, I'll go in and I'll read off the Bill of Rights, exactly what they are from the Constitution, and start discussing what these Bill of Rights mean to us, how they were meant to be applicable to us. And then I would like to just start going through each of these amendments, Amendment 1, Amendment 2, and having dialogue on this. And then we will get into just breaking down Barron versus Baltimore, because I am familiar with it, and a lot of people aren't. What you're saying that has to be dissected, because you probably just blew a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're like, well, how is the number one, how is that still president today? People do not know. These are the things that are going on that people are not cognizant of, and that we have to dissect.
This is the non-disclosure misinformation that I'm referring to. I say that the people have been kept in ignorant status as to the true workings and underpinnings of the system because of this non-disclosure. People don't know that. I have a degree in substantive law and a degree in forensics, and I had no idea, because this is contrary to our all American principles, is that we're entitled to what the Constitution says. But that's not the case, and that's the issue that we have, is that the American people have to understand that what they believe in today is not actually real, but it can be if we choose to make it real. It's up to us, because obviously they're not going to make the right decision. They're not going to correct their illegal acts that have been perpetrated against the people for 230 years. They're not going to do that. It's up to us to step up now and say, these are our laws, and we're going to defend our laws.
And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. And Tanawa, thank you again for blessing us with, number one, your time, and number two, your education, because as you said from the top, this is very, very important to everyone, but it's especially important to you. And I want you to be able to just lay out what you're a concerned citizen. This is what the channel's for. And this is what we're doing. So until next week, partner, you take care of yourself. And again,
God bless everybody.
Yeah, God bless you. And thank you again, and stay safe. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See you next week.